Welcome, scholars. This presentation is all about crafting a dissertation and the defense process based on our WILTS student handbook. We will begin by looking into the architectural blueprint of a dissertation. In part one, the statement of the problem, literature review, methodology findings, and the conclusions. And in this presentation, I will leave out the mixed method design as we were advised by Dr. Caruso to choose only one between qualitative or quantitative methods. I tried my very best to simplify the notes for you from the handbook, and I hope this presentation will be helpful. And in part two, we'll talk about what is expected of us before, during, and after our dissertation defense. Statement of the problem 101. Please note that these are the headings that should be in your chapter 1. You can change the order of these parts except for number 1, the introduction, and number 8, the definition of terms. Let's look at the introduction. It has to start without a title, and you have to grab your reader's interest by clearly stating your study's focus and why it is worth investigating. Outline the methodology, briefly summarize the problem, and summarize the need for the study with citations, leading to more detailed discussion in Chapter 2. The problem statement is a more focused section where in a quantitative study you have to concisely state what will be studied by describing at least two variables and a hypothesized relationship between them. For a qualitative study, you'll have to explain why we need to look more closely at and learn more about your topic. Your purpose of the study has to be explained clearly and logically, where it is presented without personal opinions or bias as related to your local problem and existing research. More details should be included in Chapter 2. As you already know, the theoretical or conceptual framework consists of the ideas from existing theory and concepts from the literature that support and justify the research being conducted. In Chapter 1, your theoretical and conceptual framework is presented as an overview, but you'll have to discuss it in depth in Chapter 2. For quantitative studies only, the research questions and hypotheses have to be clearly described, and they will appear again in chapter 3 and 5. And they will later emerge as a result of literature review. It's the same with assumptions and limitations. It is only for quantitative studies. You have to provide descriptions of facts assumed about the problem to be true but not actually verified. And you also have to point out the study's possible weak spots. The significance of the study describes how the study helps solve the main problem it addresses. It shows how it is useful to the field, adds to what's already known in the subject area, and how the study aims to better society or improve people's lives. Last but not least, your chapter 1 has to end with the definitions of terms, where um, this section defines important words used in the study. It presents terms in italics and in a consistent style, and you have to arrange the orders the order of the terms alphabetically. And don't forget to cite if needed. Chapter 2. The introduction of your literature review does not need a title, and it has to describe the content and the structure of your writing. Wilkes wants us to organize our literature review around major ideas or themes. Please use headings and subheadings to clearly identify its structures. Our review must relate to our research problem, participants or sites, research questions and hypotheses, and the study's purpose. To do this, you can revisit your chapter 1. Your literature review can be updated based on your findings later on when you start your research process. Please include comparisons and contrasts of different perspectives from past research or different research results. For quantitative studies, you must provide clear summaries that explain the key elements of the theory being analyzed or tested and the variables. And for qualitative studies, provide reasoning and framework for the study and the potential themes and perceptions to be investigated. Let us all be reminded that the literature review content should primarily come from scholarly sources such as peer-reviewed papers, research reports, and dissertations. Additionally, consider literature published within 5 to 10 years. The use of classic literature related to the theoretical and conceptual framework or the history or background of the problem has to be justified. Yay, we have arrived at chapter 3. And for this methodology chapter, I'm going to start with qualitative method. As usual, introduction does not need a heading or title. Here, you need to link the purpose of your study and research questions to the method of your choice. You have to justify why this method is the most appropriate for your study. Explain in detail. Imagine that you were actually teaching another researcher how to replicate the study you're conducting. It is recommended that you explain your site and sample selection by justifying and detailing the location and participant sample, as well as outlining the steps you have taken to ensure confidentiality. The rationale behind the chosen number of participants should be justified, and this involves balancing the benefits of conducting more in-depth individual inquiry with the limitations of having fewer participants. Additionally, any use of convenient sampling must be justified. The criteria and strategies for participant selection should be specified, aligning with the study's needs and objectives. Not just that, relevant demographic information about the population or research site in your qualitative study should be provided to contextualize your study's findings. Don't worry about following all these details now. When the time comes to cross the bridge, you can refer to page 45 in our student handbook. Okay, moving on. For the data collection, you will have to justify and explain your chosen data collection methods, how you gain access to the site and participants, the inclusion of data collection tools like interview and observation guides in the appendix, why you have selected the data to be collected, ensuring it is relevant and purposeful for your study's aims, the appropriateness of the data for answering your research questions within the chosen qualitative approach, details on when and how the data is collected and recorded, and lastly, how the data being collected is perfectly suited to effectively tackle your specific research questions. On top of that, your chapter 3 must also include ethical considerations where there is a need to explain the measures implemented to ensure the ethical treatment and protection of participants in your study in detail. This could include measures such as obtaining informed consent, ensuring confidentiality, and protecting participants' privacy, all aimed at upholding ethical standards throughout the research process. When your data is analyzed, describe how and when it is analyzed, your methods for addressing discrepant and inconsistent cases, any software used for the analysis, the process of coding data into categories and themes, and the procedures for analyzing data after coding. And now, onto the fun part. We've got to talk about the heroes behind the scenes, and that's you. So, in your methodology section, it is required for you to include your past and current professional roles at the research site, relationships with your participants, and potential impacts of these roles and relationships on your data collection. And yeah, we've got biases and we know it. So, in our methodology section, we will need to reveal how we navigate these biases and minimize them. The final part of the qualitative designs methodology section requires you to explain your methods to ensure your data's validity or trustworthiness and reliability. Also, your study design limitations or constraints that you set intentionally within your study. For example, your study might be delimited to only include adult participants, focus on particular geographical area, or examine a specific time period. So these choices help clarify what you aim to explore and what you will not address. So all these have to be clarified. Quantitative design methodology. Again, you don't need a title for the introduction. It should include a clear outline of the study, and the context for the study is described and justified. Under your research design segment, you should include a thorough explanation of the research design and approach, allowing another researcher to replicate the study. Justify the choice of design and approach, and you have to show how the design derives from the research problem and the study's purpose. Clearly define the dependent, independent, or other variables involved. Provide a detailed description of any treatments used. Discuss the study scope and constraints and any limitations if necessary, and outline the ethical steps taken to protect your participants' rights. Next, the setting and sample section describes and defends the population from which the sample will be or was drawn, the sample method, including the sample framework used, the sample size, the eligibility criteria for study participants, and the characteristics of the selected sample. The fourth thing that you have to include, instrumentation and materials, shall describe the data collection tools, including their names, types, the concepts they measure, how their scores are interpreted, and the process required for participants to complete them. And it should explain the reliability and validity assessments of the instruments. If the instrument is researcher made, results from pilot testing should be provided. If it has already been established, relevant literature data then should be included. Number 5, the data collection procedures outline in detail the steps and processes used for collecting data, including descriptions of any pilot studies if relevant. Next, data analysis. Okay, I'm about to make a comparison. In your proposal, the data analysis plan provides an overview of how you intend to analyze the data you will collect during your research study. It outlines the general approach, methods, and techniques you plan to use to analyze the data once it has been collected. In your dissertation, on the other hand, you will have to incorporate your preliminary data analysis findings. And this means that you will have begun to analyze some of the data collected during your study, and you will include some initial results or insights gained from this analysis in your dissertation. Overall, the analysis plan details the skill type for each variable, how the instruments are scored, the statistical techniques used for the research questions, and the assumptions of these techniques that will be tested. All right, chapter 4, findings for qualitative studies. The introduction restates the purpose of the study and the research questions without a title. And your findings have to logically follow from the problem and the research design and are presented in a way that directly addresses the research questions. And whatever you write will have to align with the research questions and the study's theoretical or conceptual framework. Make sure to incorporate all relevant data, even if they are discrepant or do not confirm the expected patterns. Findings such as patterns, relationships, and themes should be backed by data, and the method of data analysis is clear. Don't forget to mention that supporting evidence for the findings is provided in the appendices, such as data tables. Similar to qualitative studies, the introduction of your quantitative studies findings shall, without a title, restate the study's purpose. And since this is a quantitative design, you'll also have to restate your research questions. The findings must address the research questions or hypotheses as stated in your earlier sections and whether or not they are consistent with them. In your findings section, be sure that the sample is detailed, including the preliminary data analysis, and make sure that the descriptive statistics for all variables are reported. Your data analysis shall methodically address each research question or hypothesis, and the results of statistical tests are presented according to the research questions or hypotheses using tables and graphs for clear organization. And your results are systematically summarized and interpreted, emphasizing their significance to the research questions and hypotheses. Chapter 5, Conclusions. The section starts with a brief recap of the study's purpose, the questions or issues explored, and a summary of your findings. Under the discussion of the findings heading, conclusions shall address all research questions and connect the findings to broader academic literature and theoretical frameworks. References are made to specific outcomes discussed in earlier sections, supported by the gathered evidence. On top of that, limitations of the study and its findings are also acknowledged in this section. We're almost done. Implications of the study. Here you need to discuss the results' relevance to the original problem, practical applications, contributions to educational research, or societal impact. These applications are linked to the study's significance and findings from earlier sections. Possible headings include recommendations for practice, recommendations for future research, and the section concludes with a statement summarizing the study's overall purpose. All right, things are getting real, yo. Pre defense. Imagine being at this stage of your AD journey. Um, Before anything that you see on the screen right now, you will first need to choose and confirm a dissertation chair and committee members. So, to formalize this, you must complete what they call the approval for appointment of dissertation committee chair members form, gather the necessary signatures, and submit it for the department chair's approval. You will select the dissertation chair with guidance from a faculty mentor, and this selection must receive the department chair's approval before you start working on your proposal with the chair. Changes to your dissertation chair or committee members should be avoided and may only occur after consulting with the department chair, either upon your request or that of the current chair. Don't worry about this. You can find more information about um, all these members and their roles um, on page 20 of your student handbook. So let's look at the screen now. Once the chair and committee have approved your proposal for defense, um, you'll have to submit your request for proposal defense to the administrative assistant with the final edited defensible proposal at least 2 weeks prior to the requested date. You'll have to make sure that everything adheres to the current APA style and format. Right now it is APA 7th, but who knows, right? Like 3 4 years from now it'll be 8 or 9 or 10, and you have to make sure that your proposal complies with the departmental guidelines for the format and content, and it reflects doctoral level of writing. It says here that you will be responsible for sending printed or electronic copies to all involved in the defense. And yeah, I asked our student advisor, and she said we can submit our proposal electronically. Shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we're all remote anyway. Then I guess we'll just have to wait for an email for the date of the defense. According to the handbook, page 23, the proposal defense is designed to be a supportive avenue to strengthen your research study. Keep in mind that the proposal defense is not there to get you, it will only help make your research stronger. Um, so at the end of the presentation, you will leave the room so the committee and examiners will discuss recommendations and determine the status of your proposal and if it should be submitted to the IRB. Once the dissertation chair and committee agree that your dissertation is ready for defense, your chair will file a notification of intent. A typical defense lasts between 1 and 2 hours, where students present their work and answer examiners' questions. And yeah, don't worry, before the defense, the dissertation committee chair will review the procedures with you. Remember, it is crucial that you submit your final dissertation at least 2 weeks before your desired defense date, to provide the examiners enough time to review the document and formulate questions. Yeah, just like your proposal defense process. So, here are the possible outcomes of your dissertation defense. If you pass, you get your degree without any more changes or tests. If you pass with revisions, you'll get your degree after making some changes to your dissertation, but no more tests. Conditional pass means you must make more changes, and you might need to defend these changes. Um, Revise and redefend means you won't get your degree yet, and you need to revise your work and defend it again. And if you fail, which I hope you will not, you won't get your degree, and you may have to start over or may not get another chance. Oh no! So, if you pass with no or minor revisions, the committee signs off right away. And if you need to make changes, they'll assign after checking the final version. If you need to revise and defend again, they'll hold off signing until you've done so. And the chair will tell you the result and what changes you need to make, if any.